Welcome to the Angelscapes podcast, where you're encouraged to uncover and develop a direct connection with your soul's power, wisdom, and spiritual intuition that is ready to blossom. We'll explore new ideas, compelling tips, and real steps to help you learn simple spiritual practices. We're a safe place to learn more about accessing your soul's power with education and spiritual wholeness that could bring more clarity to your life. Now here's your host, a practicing medium, Akashic Records practitioner, spirit artist, coach, and mentor, Dr. Reverend Nancy Smith.
How far do you think you can take your intuition? And did you know that the military uses intuitive psychics? So join me tonight on Angelscapes. I'm your host, Nancy Smith. Welcome. And joining me tonight is Lori Williams. Just a little backstory. In 1995, a top secret military remote viewing program was declassified. And then in 1966, Lori Williams began to study CRV with retired military remote viewer trainer Lynn Buchanan. She has since then become the best teacher ever nationwide on controlled remote viewing. She is an author. She's an accomplished speaker. She has appeared on many popular radio and television and podcast programs. And Lori Williams has been researching, practicing, and studying the science of controlled remote viewing. And she's definitely taken her intuition to a professional level and helping others to take their intuition to a professional level. So Lori, welcome to the show. And let's talk about how professional intuitive work has changed your life or augmented it.
Nancy, thanks so much for having me on your podcast. I'm so excited to be here. We've been friends since 2011.
Yeah.
So I started studying with Lynn Buchanan in 1996, as you mentioned, and I studied with him really intensely for 4 years. And in 2000, I actually taught my very first class in the year 2000. So this has been a 24 years of teaching. After a bit, Lynn turned over all the basic courses in the United States that he had to me, and he continued teaching intermediate, advanced, and other levels. And so for until about, I guess around 2010 is when I finally just, his wife was having health issues. She's since passed, but she was having a lot of health issues. And she said, Lori, I can't do it anymore. You have to go out on your own. So she kind of booted me out of the nest. We were dear friends. I'm still super close with Lynn. He's going to be 85 this year.
Wow.
I know. And he was a trainer in the top secret military unit. If your listeners are interested, there is a documentary called Third Eye Spies that gives the history of the program. That's really fascinating. Jim and I, my husband Jim, who's sitting right here next to me, Jim and I are in the last 30 minutes of that documentary, but it's really interesting because it gives the whole history of how it all came to be. And it's a fascinating story.
It's called Third Eye Spy?
Third Eye Spies. It's a plural at the end. Third Eye Spies.
And where are you finding this documentary? Is on YouTube or?
It's on Prime. It's on Amazon Prime. You can find it on Amazon Prime. It's also on Gaia for those of people who subscribe to the Gaia channel. It's also on Gaia. And and so that, this has changed my life so dramatically because when I was a baby, or I don't know how old I was, I've heard different stories, but my mother said I was 2. We'll go with her story. So she was there. She said I was 2, and I had some sort of an episode where I stopped breathing and my eyes were open and fixed and glassy, and I wasn't breathing, and I was blue.
Oh,
And
no.
then I was revived. I was taken to the hospital and revived. And although I have no recollection of this incident, I have definitely been odd man out in my family for a while. I just
experience and came back. Wow.
came back a little weird. And so I remember, early memories of having angels, what I thought were angels, coming to me and taking me out of my body and taking me to classrooms, having precognitive dreams that would come true. I've had them my whole life. I've also had a really odd phenomena of psychokinesis, which is when objects move around me without anyone moving them. They just
For years.
move.
It's like, whoa.
Yeah, like we Jim's glasses would hop across the table. We're watching a movie, and he had his glasses on the table, and they just hopped across the table, or a chair that would suddenly just tip over onto two legs gracefully and then gradually just come back softly onto all four legs. We've just went to the strongest one was when I walked into my laundry room, and a brand new thing of laundry soap, one of those big heavy ones that has a spigot on it, one of those that I had just gotten home and put it in the laundry room, and I went out, and then I came back in, and it was on the floor, and I thought, well, who put it on the floor? That's weird. And I picked it up and put it back on this cabinet, and suddenly right in front of me, it lifted up in the air, spun around once, and went right back down to where it was before I picked it up. And so I called Jim, who is a retired forensic scientist, and I called him over, and I'm like, okay, in the world of physics, is there any way that you could explain this? And he said, no, there's no way that that can be explained. So we have always had a lot of phenomena like that around me my whole life, and out of body experiences and that sort of thing. And I just kind of felt, well, I guess, I just thought maybe this is how everybody's life is. I didn't know. And then I was reading a book about some research that has been done on children who have near-death experiences. And in this book, they researched and followed these kids for 20 years. And he said that the main researcher who authored the book, said that they found that children who have near-death experiences or who actually die and are revived tend to have a much higher degree of psychic ability. And he defined normal as someone who has one verifiable psychic experience per lifetime. And I thought, holy cow, if that's normal, that means I am not normal.
Oh,
So I was like, that was amazing to me. And that made me really curious in thinking, okay, so I need to find out what this is and how to control it. And that next day, I met a man at a conference who I had actually dreamed about the night before. He was a speaker at this conference, and they had introduced him as Colonel so-and-so. And I had just met my very first colonel a few days earlier, and I thought, I just met my first colonel, and now I've met another one all in 1 week. I met two colonels. Anyway, this man told me about the remote viewing program, and then when I got home, I looked it up, and I found Lynn's website and the very new internet, because the internet was pretty new in 1996. And so I looked Lynn up, and then I sent him an email with great trepidation, because, they were always warning you have to watch out about meeting people on the internet. So I was kind of scared, but I sent him an email, and he wrote me this very gracious, beautiful letter back. And then I found myself stuck in Maryland, which is where Lynn was living. I had gone to another conference. I ended up in Maryland, and I was stuck over the weekend. So he said, well, come meet my wife and come visit us. So I rented a car, and I said, if I can get a car for $24.99, I'll know I'm supposed to go. And I picked up the phone, the Hertz phone, in the lobby of the hotel I was staying in. And they said, well, we have one for tomorrow for $24.99.
my
So
gosh.
I drove to Lynn's house and spent 5 hours speaking with him. Excuse me. And it was just so delightful. And I felt like I'd really met a kindred spirit. And his explanation of how psychic ability works and how CRV can play into that to help you learn to control these, random psychic things, so that you're actually aiming at a target. I mean, and I say aiming, but I'm figuratively speaking. It's an analogy of, if I was out on a field and there were three targets in front of me, and I had a bow and arrow, then it helps you so that you hit the bullseye of the target you're aiming at, even in spite of Kentucky windage, where the wind is going to blow your arrow off course. And so Lynn and I linked up right then, and then I quickly became really good friends with his wife, and they became like second parents to me, truly. And so I'm 66 now, and I'm a great grandma, but but
Yeah.
Lynn and his wife became second parents to me, and they just took me under their wing, and Lynn just taught me and taught me and taught me and taught me. And I kept driving. They moved to Alamogordo, New Mexico, and I would drive from Amarillo, Texas to Alamogordo every other weekend.
Oh my goodness. How far of a
And
drive is that? Like 5 hours?
that's 6 hours. It's a 6 hour drive.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And so every other weekend I would leave my family and drive there 6 hours so I could attend the class, because he was teaching every other weekend at that time, and it was a 3-day course. So I would get there as quick as I could. I would stay there with him and just be there. And I took the classes over and over and over and over. And then he would test me periodically and say, well, Lori, what do you think about this? Or Lori, what's the answer to this one? And sometimes I would just freeze. Like, I don't know. And eventually I got to where I could answer everything so easily. And then he said, okay, I think you're ready to start teaching now because you know all the answers. So I love teaching. Teaching runs in my genes. My father was a professor. His father was a professor. So I think I have these teaching genes, and I really love teaching. And of course, I love controlled remote viewing too. I had someone ask me once, it was actually a comment on Facebook or something, and it said, well, why in the world would I want to control my intuition? And I thought, well, why would you want to control your car? I mean, just
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I was running a refugee resettlement program for many years. I've always been involved in social work and wanting to help people. And eventually, the work that I was doing with CRB and the teaching became so demanding. I mean, with more and more people really wanting to learn it, that I finally left my job and I do this full time now. I teach full time. And this is my ballywick, I guess you could say. I just absolutely love it. And I now have a company, and we have a company with full-time employees and
Yeah, you
coaches.
so
And
much. Since I met you, your company has grown tremendously. It's been very exciting to watch. It was a tipping point for you. I mean, you found Lynn Buchanan, you worked with him. I know that you worked as a remote viewer for a while. And when you
I
worked as a remote viewer, you also had other intuitive things that you were doing. Um, what what was the significant thing that actually got you into doing it professionally? And what was your takeaway from all those years of you're not teaching, you're doing it professionally?
Yeah, when I first started studying with Lynn, I was so excited. I mean, I was practically shaking because there were several things that really turned my key. One was the understanding that time was not linear and that time is happening all at once, and that there's such a thing as the future creating the past, and in a thing that we call retrocausality. And I became absolutely enamored with the idea of using controlled remote viewing as a time machine, traveling through time and being able to witness things that happened in the past and that sort of thing. So that was a huge thing for me that just made me latch on like a dog that won't let go of the bone. I was so excited. And another thing that I just knew from the first day of basic, that I was supposed to teach this. It was like, oh, this is my thing. This is what I was born to do. And so I really, I had a period of my life where I was a missionary, a period of my life where I was rescuing refugees and resettling refugees. And then my third period of my life is teaching people how to access their intuition and how to actually utilize it in a way that's useful to them. Because what I like to ask people is, if you could truly control your psychic experiences, how would that change your finances? How would that change your career? How would that change your relationships? How would that change your life? If you had absolute control over things and could get answers when you need them. And people are always like, and so I really wanted to do it professionally. Number one, because I felt like, how can you teach something that you don't know how to do yourself? And so I got really excited with the thought of helping finding missing children. That was my first thing, because Lynn kept saying that he wanted to use this to help find missing children. So I became enamored with that idea. And for about 2 years, actually, I had the opportunity to work with the police with missing people. It wasn't specific to children, and it wasn't specific to victims. Unfortunately, sometimes when we're looking for a missing person, it's a criminal. And so I did that for 2 years until it just became too draining emotionally for me to always be seeking people who were in these desperate situations, whether they were criminals or victims or children or adults. It didn't matter. It was always something that kind of left you kind of, for somebody who's got a tender heart and wants to help people, it can be, a bit
Yeah.
straining. And I realized I had a little too much of that on the menu for me.
I did that for a little while myself. And yeah, I remember one desperate attempt to find a child who was missing, and I knew that she only had so many hours left intuitively. And I found her, And but then it was too late, and I actually saw, and I said, "That's it. This is the last." I knew where I this is the last time I can do this, because there, you have no control over what happens, and you see it all.
Yeah. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Okay.
And so it was too hard. And I worked for a number of months trying to help on a kidnapping case. And that was, it was exciting, and there were a lot of really good hits that were pretty amazing, that kind of encouraged me that, oh, there's no ceiling to this. There's no limit to how good you can get at this. But at the same time, when you're realizing that times, I think they had a mole, for lack of a better word. They had a mole that was part of the investigative team who kept reporting what we were reporting so they could get away quicker. So, every time the police got to where, or the investigative team got to where we told them to go, they could tell they had just been there and they had just left. So somebody was giving them a heads up.
Okay.
And so that kind of thing can be really exhausting. So but I did love I also loved working on archaeological things, and I did several archaeological things, and Lynn gave me some great targets. And I also did a number of targets for MUFON, which is interesting because I came from this missionary background where I never thought about UFOs. They just weren't even in my mental construct. Neither did I ever think about things like Bigfoot, Sasquatch.
Yes.
So to get tasked with those things, when you're completely blind to the target, you have no idea what you're being asked to remote view, and they just give you a number and you're asked to remote view it. And then I had to have some of these really amazing experiences with interdimensional beings and things that were not even part of my lexicon, 30, 40 years ago. So it's really caused my God box to explode and get a lot bigger.
So for those who don't know what MUFON is, um,
Mutual UFO Network.
thank you. Okay.
Yes, the Mutual UFO Network is what MUFON is. And what it is, it's an organization that investigates sightings of UFOs. And then they investigate them so much that they found that only about 5% of the ones they've investigated, and they've investigated tens of thousands, can they actually say this was probably truly a UFO sighting. Um, so, because a lot of them could be other things.
Well, yeah, but that's kind of exciting. So your world grew huge, exponentially huge, once you started to do this work. Not
It really did, yeah.
relate time, relative time, or and move on, and um people, the nature of people, I would think, all those missing people, you got to see, here's what a lot of people are, how they're made. And how did it help your life?
Oh my gosh, I am the mother of 7 children,
Mhm.
and then now I have two beautiful stepdaughters that have been in my life for 23 years. But prior to Jim and his beautiful daughters coming into my life, I was raising these children, and my ex-husband and I got into CRV together, and we found that it was super helpful in parenting. And it helped keep the kids safe, because there was a point at which one of our kids, a daughter, she had some friends who were planning to buy LSD, and they were planning to experiment with LSD. And so we found that studying CRV caused like a heightened sense of psychic ability, and in general, and things that had been limited to just dreams at night, so to speak, started happening during the day. And we one night, so this was the night prior to the day when they were going to experiment with this LSD. And we had no idea what they were going to do. It was all a secret. And so that night, I dreamt that Robert Downey Jr. was trying to kidnap my daughter, and she was a baby in the dream. And that was during the time that Robert Downey Jr. was getting sent to prison for drugs.
Okay.
And
Oh,
at the same time, my husband dreamt that some guy was trying to give drugs to her in her bedroom, and he ran down the stairs and burst into her bedroom and started beating this man up. And then meanwhile, she dreamt that her dad burst through the wall of her bedroom and started beating her friend up, the one that was supposed to buy the LSD. So she comes running to our bedroom first thing in the morning. She runs in, she bursts in, she goes, "Oh my gosh, I had this dream that dad burst through my wall and was beating my friend up." And my husband said, "Yeah, I did. I dreamt that I burst into your room and started beating somebody up." And I said, "Well, I dreamt that Robert Downey Jr. was trying to kidnap you." We all went, "What is going on?" And she said, "Well, my friend was going to buy LSD and we were going to try LSD today." And so that was one thing. And another thing would happen when my son, who at the time was 16,
Mhm.
was going to climb out his window and go sneak out at night for the first time in his life. He was going to sneak away because a young lady, a very pretty girl, invited him to come to her house at 2 a.m. to get lucky. And since he had never been lucky before, he was pretty excited about getting lucky. So so he creeps out his window and he walks across the lawn, and his room was on the far end of what we called the east wing of our house. It was a one-story wing, and then we were on the second floor of the west part of the house, way back in the bedroom. So we were as far from his bedroom as we could get, and there was no way we could hear him or anything. He just opened the window, stepped outside, goes creeping across the lawn, down the driveway, and he gets to the end of the driveway, and his dad's standing there going, "You get back in the house. You're not going to go make love to that girl."
My goodness.
He goes, "Mom, it was so hard to grow up with parents who were remote viewers."
Oh, God.
And we saw them, we could see what they were doing. We could check on them and know what they were doing. And at one point, my son had he had joined the Coast Guard. He was in Cape Canaveral. And so I wrote him and I said, "Hey, at 4 p.m. on Thursday, I saw you in this huge room with a bunch of guys and everybody was carrying big white boxes." And he goes, "Gosh, Mom, I was in a warehouse and we were moving washing machines."
Oh,
And so then we saw his brother who was in California at the time, doing some work, and we were telling him what he was doing at a certain time on a certain day. So they were very convinced that we could, in fact, remote view them anytime we wanted to know what they were up to. So then they were kind of like, "Oh, can't get away with much when your parents can do that. So
oh my gosh. Well, that's terrific. Now, so many questions I want to ask you. What Lynn was the one who kind of pushed you into teaching, correct? Because you were just going in to see him and going to see him and
Well, yes, and what happened was when we took that very first basic course, Lynn taught it in San Diego. So we flew from Amarillo to San Diego, and we were the ones who had come the furthest. So Lynn said, "I will drive you to the airport when you have to go home." So he was driving us to the airport, and we were pretty excited because we got to be alone with the teacher, got to ask him whatever. And I said, my biggest concern was that I thought he was very old. I I was in my 30s, and I thought he's got to be, one foot in the grave and another on a banana peel. And he was actually only like 56 at the time. And, but young people tend to kind of
I know,
perceive
yeah,
things
yeah.
differently. So I said, "What's going to happen to this when you die?" You know? And he said, "Well, I need somebody to pass it on to." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's got to be me. I just really feel
Oh,
like I'm supposed to
great.
teach this." And I'm literally just took my first 3 days of basic. And I'm like, I'm supposed to teach this. I know I'm supposed to teach this.
So
So
great.
I just knew right away. And so he didn't have to push me at all. He just, he actually put up with me is what he did.
Put up with me. He's
He
a
did. He put up with me. I was like the bad penny that wouldn't go away, because you know how I always joke that when I kept telling him, "I want to teach this, I really want to teach this, I want to teach this." And after I had taken advanced, I'd gone through basic, intermediate, advanced, and taken the courses a couple of times. I said, "Okay, it's been 2 years now since I took advanced. I really feel like it's time for me to start teaching, but I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I want to teach your course." And he said, "Well,
Mhm.
if you want to teach my course," and I joke that he said, "You have to get the broomstick of the Wicked Witch of the West." But but that's what it felt like, because he's like, "If you want to teach my course, you're going to have to be here for every class I teach." And he knew that I had a ton of children, and he knew that I had this crazy job that kept me going 24/7. And I think he kind of thought, "She'll never do it. She won't ever do it." But I was there every other weekend.
Doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, and he jokes now. He goes, "Yeah, I really didn't think you'd do it." So, and then it was suddenly there I was. I just kept coming and coming and coming and coming to visit him and to sit at his feet while he taught.
You
And
are a very important, I feel, a very important teacher in the CRV community. You have a very specific, you're very clean and specific according to what Lynn has taught. And you're highly motivated. There's a couple things you have said that you want to have as many students as possible because you feel they're going to change the world. They're going to make this world a better place. And it's a totally different motivation than I have heard anywhere. So talk to me about that, because I think it's moved me. I know it will move people to hear about it, but
Yeah, I became really good friends with the very first remote viewer that was put into the unit. When they decided to create the remote viewing unit, the very first guy they chose was Melvin C. Riley, who we call Mel. And Mel had been raised with the Ho-Chunk Nation of Native Americans in Wisconsin and been trained from them from a very young age. Even though he was, white as a piece of paper and didn't have a drop of Native American blood, they really honored him as a member of the tribe. He would create all their regalia for their weekend, what were they called, babe? Powwows, for the weekend powwows, and he would do all the bead work. He did all this intricate bead work. He was the curator for the Native American Museum. And somehow, he just took to me. He and I had been assigned, without knowing it, to a project viewing something on Mars. And we both had a wild experience on that. And you could actually read about it in my blog at intuitivespecialist.com. But he and I became really good friends once we had to present on this project. We presented at a conference together. So that's how we found out that the other one, had been working on the same project. But and after that, we were just dear friends. And he and his wife came and visited us and stayed with us. And we went to Wisconsin and stayed in their home, and we became super close. And we talked on the phone frequently. And one thing he said to me, because he was also the only soldier of all the people that were in that unit over 20 years, he was the only one who was in twice. They had him in 4 years, and then they sent him off for reconnaissance for 4 years and had him back for 4 years. So he
yeah.
got to be there for 8 years, and he learned a lot. And he said, a lot of people will get into this and their goal is to make money. And he said, and they never become good at it. He said, it's the people that come in with a spiritual motivation, or they really want to learn about it. They want to grow themselves. Those are the people who become world class, And so that always stuck with me. I've never gotten into this because of money. I've always wanted to do it to raise the consciousness on the planet. And one of the things that has really been motivational is to see how many people have never thought that they could reach their potential. They never thought they had a psychic bone in their body, and then they end up becoming really good remote viewers with training. And that is, so exciting.
Yeah.
I had a guy who took my course. He took several of them, and I said, "Hey, I'm getting ready to write a book about remote viewing." And I said, if you had, you've seen a lot of books on remote viewing, so if you wanted to see something that you haven't seen yet, what would you want to see in a book? And he said, well, if somebody would have just told me that you don't have to think you're psychic, you don't have to have seen angels or have had weird dreams or have seen ghosts or anything, that just an ordinary person who's never had any kind of experience can learn this. I really wish somebody had told me that, so I made sure and put that in the book because I think that, yeah, it's huge. I don't know did I answer your question?
Yeah, you're just perfect. All this, everything segued together. I do want to take just 2 minutes and say you can reach Lori at intuitivespecialist.com. She mentioned that. You can reach out to Lori at intuitivespecialist.com. And on Facebook, she's Intuitive Specialist and also Lori Williams. So you can find her there. LinkedIn is Intuitive Specialist. Or is it?
Yeah, I believe it is. It is. I'm terrible with social media, but I do have a Facebook group that's called Remote Viewing with Lori Williams that anybody can join. And then also we have a YouTube channel that's Intuitive Specialist with tons of free videos on YouTube.
That's true. Yeah. Meant to say that you catch a YouTube, that YouTube Intuitive Specialist is precious, where you can really get to know Lori and what she says, and you can really start to understand what CRV is all about. And you can also go on to her website, Lori, intuitivespecialist.com, and there is the free classes up there.
Right, there's a free class. And when I created the free class, my purpose was that, and everybody that was into marketing, would say, "No, you can't put out a free class. You could make money from this class." I said, I want this class to be free because people have to experience this for themselves. to
Right.
really know that it works. If you've got kind of a doubt, like, is this really real or are people just faking it? Well, when you do it yourself, you're not faking, you're not tricking yourself. So that was my goal, is everybody has to do it. To my shock, because we set a date. We said, okay, we're going to launch this. And I remember that I had $500 to spend on advertising, to actually advertise something for the first time in my life. And then the guy who was going to do the ad said, could you up that to 1,000? And I remember looking at Jim and saying, oh my gosh, should we spend $1,000? I was scared to death. So we put out $1,000 worth of ads, and we had 4,300 people sign up to take this free class. And we were shocked. And normally when you do something and you put something out free, 20% of the people who sign up to take the free thing will actually show up and take it. So they said, if you get 20%, you're doing great. 20% of 4,300 people. We had 80% of 4,300 people take it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard a lot of comments on people taking that class where they really, I have to go on, I have to learn more. This is really it ain't whether they went on and did more or not, the comments were, this has changed how I look at things. This is amazing. But I feel like you did get a few students that went on from that class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have had a lot of students who've gone on from that class, because now the class is always out there. Although back in January, Facebook got hacked by the Russians. They had a Russian hack. And because of that hack, we have shut down our Facebook ad account. So we're not advertising at all right now on Facebook. We do have a few ads out on Google, but not much. And so, but the free class is always there. It's on the website. You can go right there and just punch right in and take it. And it's a fun class. We also have a free quiz called what is it called? What is your intuitive intelligence profile?
Ah,
What is and it's so funny because we actually put out the quiz with several different things, like how psychic are you, or what is your psychic strength? We tested all these different things. And the one that most people opened was, what is your intuitive intelligence profile? It was the one we thought would be at the least opens. For some reason, a lot of people really, really like that. And it's a free quiz that helps you understand, like, whether you're clairvoyant, whether your strength is clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, or claircognizance, which is clear seeing, clear hearing, clear knowing, or clear sensing or clear knowing. And so we call it the knower, the feeler, the seer, and the what was it? The seer, the hearer, the knower, and the feeler. Those are the 4 different categories we have. And so you fill out you answer a few little questions, and then a video of me comes up and says, you happen to be a hearer, for example. And then I talk all about being clairaudient and what that means and that sort of thing. And they get a little report, a few pages long of a PDF of a report. And it's all free. It's
I did
free.
that a couple of times. I had fun with it, and I focused on each one of my clairs to see what was going to come up, and so I heard all of your little lectures. And you are a knower, or you are. Because I used so many of my clairs that it wasn't hard, but I really, that's a really fun one to go on.
It's a fun quiz.
And the
Go ahead.
blogs are also really amazing on your site. It really explains CRV, how you can use it, why you could use it. And I use a lot of the stuff even today. I'll go back and read a couple of the blogs. I think my what is the one with the ERV, the one class that you teach that talks about?
It's called Beyond Advanced, CRV for professional viewers. Yeah, in that class, I teach a type of remote viewing in addition to CRV. It includes CRV it's for people who've already graduated from advanced and they go into beyond advanced. They want to be professionals. So it teaches them a bunch of corporate tools that they could use in a corporate setting or in a professional setting. But additionally, it has an element that's called the extended remote viewing course. And so in that course, you actually remote view in a hypnagogic state. Jim and I, shortly after 9/11, I decided that my boss at the time, I was running the refugee program, and he said, hey, you're a single mom, and there's, we might fold because of the anthrax thing and all the stuff going on. A lot of nonprofits didn't survive 9/11. And so he said, I don't know if we're going to make it, and you should have something to fall back on. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go to school and become a hypnotherapist. So I did. I went back to school And actually, that's how Jim and I ended up getting together, partly because he said, "Oh, well, I want to become a hypnotherapist too." So, and so we started traveling together down to Boerne, Texas, to study at a school there, and we got our hypnosis certifications after about 6 months, I think. And it was during all those trips that we decided to get married, and that's how we ended up getting married. But but the hypnosis is a fascinating thing, and it really coalesces nicely with CRV, because CRV really has to do with the left and right brain and their interaction with each other. It's based on brain science. It also has a lot to do with the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and how they interact. And then there's also the element of whether you're staying awake, sitting at a desk, writing on a piece of paper, very alert with your brain waves pretty much in the beta and alpha states. And what happens when you allow yourself to relax and get into a truly a hypnagogic state, going into deep alpha or even theta waves, which is when your brain waves really slow down, and then you kind of are in a different state of mind. You're no longer sitting at a table writing on a piece of paper. You actually, when they did it in the unit, the viewer would be lying down, and there would be a very skilled person called the monitor, who had to be good with hypnosis, who would actually take the viewer into various stages of consciousness, because there's many, many levels of consciousness. And so he would let the viewer go very, very, very deep, and then bring the viewer up a little bit and ask the viewer a question, get an answer, let the viewer go deep again, visiting the target the whole time. And so we've been doing that for many years now, teaching that as well.
Speaking of monitoring, Lori has two books out. One is called Monitoring by Lori Lambert Williams, and the other one is called Boundless, which is phase one of the CRV process, correct? And
Yes.
we're all waiting for phase two and three. But the monitoring book is an excellent book to read if you feel like you want to get into CRV, but you're not sure if you want to do it. And monitoring, I feel, I've given away lots of copies of that book. It's just a beautiful way of observing somebody. And I've learned a lot just reading that book, to observe other people and what they do, so I can see where their minds are at. Boundless gets you really clear phase one work. So I recommend checking these books out. And are they on Audible? One is on Audible.
Boundless is on Audible. Yes. And for people who are curious just to understand a little more about the process, Boundless is really the first book. My son was so funny because when I wrote Monitoring, which was my first book I put out, and it's a little skinny little book. I put it out, and then I gave copies of it to my kids. I didn't expect them to read it. I thought they could just keep it as a souvenir and put it on the shelf. My son goes, "Mom, I've read your book, but I didn't understand it." So I said, "Oh, well, read this one now." And I had written Boundless. I said, "This one will help you understand the other one." So Boundless really is the first one that they should read, because it's got the whole foundation of CRV and the basics. But it's really Boundless is now on Audible. It's on Spotify. It's on iTunes. It's everywhere as an audio book. If you happen to be in 70% of my students listen to Audible, and 85% of my students like to listen to audiobooks. So if you're interested, definitely jump in, and you can get the book on Audible. And the cool thing with the book is that if you get the book, you also get a free copy of the book. I mean, it's not a physical copy; it's an ebook that you get. So
Very nice. I'm gonna go look for it tonight. I love the Audible versions. It's been all very exciting. Lori, what leaving before you go, what is the biggest thing, or really good punchy thing that you want to share with people listening? I feel like there's a lot of people listening who are just getting to know CRV, but they're mostly learning intuitive, moving beyond the norm. What was your good leave behind?
I have heard people looking at people's comments on social media. There are people who have a fear of failure, and they tell me repeatedly that they're looking for a way to separate just random thoughts and imagination from true psychic perceptions. And occasionally they tell me they're afraid of success. They're worried that they're going to scare themselves, find something that's too scary. And so what I really like to encourage people is, you definitely can explore your intuitive side, because it could mean the difference between life and death, really, down the road. We live in a world that's uncertain. Everything is uncertain. We've got, wars going on. We've got climate stuff happening, and we've got crazy politics all over the world going on as well. So when you think about that, it helps you to have that extra edge, the extra tool in your pocket, right? To really hone your intuitive skills could help you protect your family and help you protect yourself from the unexpected, right? When people proclaim doom and gloom and big catastrophes coming, but they don't specify what they are or how you can take care of yourself in the face of these things, then I feel like that just makes everything scary and not helpful, unhelpful. So what I'd like to encourage people is if you're kind of feeling uncertain about what's coming, you want to build your confidence, you want to hone your skills, I think CRV is a very safe platform to crawl out on, to learn and to create that structure that can hold you up and really help enhance your skills. And it also is a wonderful personal development tool. You learn so much about yourself through the practice and the learning of CRV.
Amen to that. And as a working medium, I've taken CRV many times, and where I'm not out there as a controlled remote viewer. My mediumship has gone deeper. The information is clear, a little more clear, and I'm able to really dig deep into areas that I couldn't dig deep to before. So it definitely has helped me in my area of being perceptive, and I appreciate that.
I send a lot of people your way because you're so gifted, and you've been studying with me now for 13 years. Can you believe
Whoa.
that? The
No.
first class you took with me was in 2011 up there in Massachusetts. And that was kind of a funny story because that January, because you took the class with me around October, November,
Right.
but that
Yeah.
January, I walked out the door and I said, "Oh, Jim, this year we're going to take our motorhome and we're going to drive up the East Coast and we're going to visit my best friend Greg, who lives in Massachusetts, and we're going to see all the fall colors." And Jim said, "Lori, how are we going to do that?" And I said, "We're going to get a class." And literally 5 minutes later, the phone rang and this woman said, "Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I have a center in blah, 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 Massachusetts," wherever it was. And she said, "And would you be willing to come in October and teach?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." We talked a few minutes. I get off the phone and literally called Jim 10 minutes after I said that and said, "Well, we've got the class. It's set up and it's 20 minutes from Greg's house."
Oh,
So
God,
it
you're
was
like
so
this,
funny.
Esther. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
You can't make this stuff up.
No.
But yeah, so that was the class you were in, and I think we had met prior to that at an IRVA conference, but that was the first class you took.
Yeah.
That's how you heard about me because we met at the IRVA conference.
Yeah, I've
Like,
gone up to with a friend of mine who was very much, she studied with you for a couple of years and very much into the IRVA thing. And it just, the whole thing blew my head off, listening to everyone talk. And when you came up and you were talking about mediumship and remote viewing, I think you mentioned, I was like, oh, okay, she's talking my language. I get it. And it was wonderful. And yeah, no, it took me a little while to get through all the programs, but I think I've gone through all of them now.
oh yeah, you have, and some of them multiple times. So
Yeah.
yes, you're awesome. That's great. Well, thank you so much for having me on your show, Nancy.
Thank you
I
for spending your time with me and my peeps. And I really appreciate, I'm really honored that you're talking on this podcast. It's just terrific.
Oh, it's an honor for me to be here. And if any of your folks are interested, they could take the free class and get in touch with me. And my email is Lori@intuitivespecialist.com with an S at the end of specialist. It's plural. Lori@intuitivespecialists.com. And we'd love for you to join us and be part of our fun. We're getting more into mediumship too in my company, and Nancy's probably going to be a big part of that as we also add that as an adjunct to controlled remote viewing, extended remote viewing, associative remote viewing, and mediumship.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. I'm really excited about that. We'll see. You're always something new, Lori. Your company just goes leaps and bounds. It's been a huge influence in my life, and I really feel anyone listening to it. And I, like I said, I always bring people onto these podcasts that are available that you can learn from, and they will augment your spiritual growth, your soul growth, or just open up your life to things beyond the end of your nose. And I recommend Lori especially for going further with your intuitive development in an organized, very holistic way. So use the people. They're awesome. So thank you, Lori, for coming.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
And I'll say, and till next time, guys, stay safe, stay spiritual, and stay in your authentic self.
Thank you for joining the Angelscapes podcast. We hope you've gained new insights and inspiration for your journey to uncover and access your soul's power. For more information and a deeper dive into finding clarity in your life, go to angelscapes.com. Remember to subscribe so you can be part of the discussion. It may just change your life. See you next time.